Okay, my name is Jeffrey Anderson. I'm a AR and VR developer for an architecture firm called Mancini Duffy in New York City. And I've been teaching technology studios and seminars for architecture students at Pratt Institute and University of Pennsylvania for the last 5 years or so. And I'm a judge on the Kaleidoverse competition. New technology. I think that the goal of it is to be ubiquitous. It's meant to be kind of flattened for everyone to be able to use. And I also think the term metaverse is also branded in a way. I think metaverse is kind of a brand name for a particular host of virtual reality technologies. So virtual reality is the technology, and metaverse is maybe the brand for it. I think that Metaverse Architecture is super important for the architectural discipline. I've been working in creating virtual reality experiences for architectural clients for the last probably 7 years or so. And I think creating a kind of ecosystem for these experiences to be shared, important new possibility for architects. I think that the technology for virtual reality is becoming more and more open to people. So I think that as that happens, clients will expect more from architects in terms of creating a kind of virtual representation of their building. And I also think that with the metaverse becoming more popular, the possibility for kind of virtual only architectural spaces is coming up, right? So a client might ask an architect to make them an experience that will never be built, but will be nonetheless a kind of architectural experience, a spatial experience. So I think that's an important step here, that you might be asked to create something that's lives only in the metaverse, but is important and interesting and has spatial qualities nonetheless. I think that the relationship between technology and design is important. I think that new technologies open up new design possibilities, right? So anything from the invention of cheap paper to the invention of the elevator have opened up new possibilities for design. Having cheap paper allowed artists to practice more. So as opposed to making kind of maquettes of things and doing drawings of those, you could draw actual fabrics, for example, as they lay on a model, and test that. And that kind of changed how art functioned during the Renaissance, or the possibilities of art. The elevator, for example, allowed buildings to be taller. So tall buildings were a technical possibility, but it wasn't convenient as for a person to occupy them until the invention of the elevator. So I think technologies kind of expand the design space of architecture, the space of all possibilities of things that can happen. So I believe that that relationship is important. I think that the relationship of digital technologies to architecture has opened up a lot of new possibilities for design, but I also think that things like logistics and things like that get smoothed out a lot through digital communication technologies. So if you have a complicated facade, it's not just about designing that, it's about aligning all of the trades into creating that in the world, right? And I think that new real-time rendering and virtual reality technologies have opened up the ability for different trades to coordinate more precisely. So as opposed to having a 2D drawing set, you could have the electrician experience a 3D model of the space. So there's no ambiguity between the translation to the drawing and the experience of the space. So you get fewer errors in construction, for example. I think that's a kind of important possibility for VR. I think that something interesting about AR technologies is that reality becomes the kind of context for the model you're placing in it. You hear a lot of people say, "Oh, AR is like the new frontier, super interesting. I'm not that interested in VR." You'll hear architects say this, but I've found that over the last 5 years, VR has become incredibly important to architecture, and I'm hearing that less and less. I have a client right now that experiences all of his spaces in VR, and he recently wanted to see how, like he does restaurants. He wanted to see how the tables look in the construction site. So we're producing a kind of AR overlay for him because he believes that that'll allow him to understand the spacing between tables and the relationship of the architecture to the column better. But I have a sense that he's going to find the experience not to be as fulfilling as the VR experiences that he's gotten used to over the last couple of years. I think he'll find that he'll want to see more and more, and eventually it'll become just the VR experience again for him. But I think that the relationship to metaverse development, the way that we're setting up the 3D models for these experiences will be identical, right? So there's a possibility for sharing the experience of something between different technologies. We also do a lot of kind of just desktop and keyboard fly-through stuff using the exact same exporter and importer methods that we do for AR and VR. And there's, thinking of the metaverse, that's just a way of hosting these models between different technologies or developing a kind of multiplayer experience for them. So I think that that form of translation between technologies is something more trivial. It's the kind of ecosystem of making these models available to large numbers of people. That's kind of the hope of the metaverse, I think.